All right, hey, what's up, everybody? We are live from basically not our studio. That's right. This time we are coming to you from our respective homes because our studio is under construction right now. We're actually moving into a new place. So we're trying to get that stuff ready for you guys. And, we've got all kinds of stuff planned for you. But the question we got tonight, the return of evil clone Luke. Is this possible? We're going to talk about it right now.
You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars. Begins now.
All right, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this show. So, looks like a lot of different stuff is happening in Star Wars. I mean, we got so many different things that we could be talking about right now. We had, of course, the premiere of The Bad Batch. And did you actually see the episode that was released today yet?
Yep.
Okay, I have not. But
Okay.
fear not, we're going to do a full Bad Batch review on Monday's show. But tonight, we're going to talk about the possibility of some more Legends stuff coming back into the play. We've had all kinds of different discussions in the past about what could they bring up, what could possibly happen with a lot of the Legends stuff. And it looks like, first we had Thrawn coming in and we had, all kinds of other different stuff. And now looks like we might get evil clone Luke back. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. So you ready?
Hey, let's go for it.
All right, let's do it. All right, so basically, it came from this whole comic. Now, did you actually read the comic that all this information came from?
I have not got a chance to actually read the comic.
How did I know?
But normally I do, though. The comics I usually can get through.
That's true. Yeah, that's
short
true.
reads.
You've actually, I got to admit, you've been really good about the comics. I have to give you props on that.
Yeah, but this one kind of escaped me, but I did kind of read up a lot about it. I know it's kind of, and it's one of those things that it's funny because you actually kind of brought or alluded to some of this on the last show. And that's what kind of made me want to kind of explore this a little bit deeper. Because in Legends, to which you're very, well versed in, there's a lot of different things that has transpired in that timeline. Now, granted, of course, we're into new canon now, so a lot of things, have obviously changed. However, we're starting to see some things come into that's coming from Legends into new canon.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of those things in this particular comic is this whole thing of Luke's hand. Now, of course, everybody's been kind of speculating what happened with that ever since Empire Strikes Back, which is kind of weird because initially you kind of think like, okay, his hand got lopped off. What's the big deal? What's so important about Luke's hand and why, has that been kind of the talk for so many years? And, as we've kind of grown to know Palpatine a little bit more and more in depth, we kind of see that he's really into alchemy. He loves playing with like biology and all this kind of stuff. He's really into this like magic and chemistry and, cloning. And as we can see from the original prequels with the cloning of Jango Fett. So he's been into cloning for a long time. The clone troopers were kind of commissioned by him through back channels, of course, but ultimately the root of it started with Palpatine. So now here we are again with Palpatine once again having his hand in something.
You did there.
Yeah, see what I did there. So once again, so now we have Palpatine, now with the ultimate specimen or temple of Skywalker, which is Luke Skywalker's hand.
Right. And I mean, the thing that you have to remember is that, and you're absolutely right. The whole concept of what happened to Luke's hand, I'm actually surprised that we've had so much written or talked about this, because we did see a lot about the cloning facilities and stuff in the prequels. And of course, that gave us a little bit of background when you watch the original trilogy, when you look at when Luke first got his hand cut off, and then, 2-1B basically gave him that robotic hand or whatever, and then obviously the technology has grown, and it's like, well, this is pretty high tech. Where did this come from? And that gave us a little bit of that background. But then, again, the sequel trilogy really focused on it. A lot of legend stories focused on it, where the idea was that they took Luke's hand, the Emperor took Luke's hand, and actually created a clone of Luke, like an evil dark side clone. And that's basically like, if you just look at it from, like right there, right? This is something that came up in the most recent Vader comic where he was talking about, he actually visited Exegol and then he passes by. This is actually a really quick scene in the comic, and it's kind of like Palpatine saying, I can use it to make anything. I mean, he's basically talking about, the cloning technology and stuff like that. But that begs the question, if they're bringing this concept into the new canon, are we going to actually start to see the evil Luke come back? And if we do you think it's going to be the same way?
That's the ultimate question. Or even not even so much if they, but should they? Because at this point, when this was done, obviously this is in a time where, of course, Vader is still around. So at this point, does that mean you're going to bring back Hayden Christensen? Are we going to get more Vader material? Because if you're talking about this timeline, right, we're talking about, okay, well, now Vader's still around. So now this is kind of coming in to a lot of different, now you're dipping once again into that timeline. And you always have talked about this, that we kind of, the closer you kind of get to stuff, you kind of mess with the original trilogy, and we've already seen that with the sequel trilogy, how they brought Palpatine back. Now granted, some people like this, some people didn't, but now with something like this, it's like, okay, this time period is talking about a younger Luke Skywalker. So once again, are you going to get somebody like Sebastian Stan to play Luke Skywalker, or some other person who could play a Luke Skywalker? And this is what the fans want to see. A lot of fans weren't happy with the way Luke was portrayed in the sequel trilogy, and they felt like, we never got that Luke Skywalker, that all-powerful, Jedi Master, to see him fully kind of come into his own and really kind of be a butt kicker. We never got that from him. We got grumpy, crotchety Luke, who just kind of eventually just, died and became a Force ghost. And so now he's doing all his stuff from that perspective, but we never got to see a fully matured, seasoned Luke Skywalker. And I think that if you do that, now you're messing with, like I said, certain timelines. And is that the Luke Skywalker that the fans really want to see?
Well, and the other thing too is it just going to be contained to a comic storyline, or is this going to go off into something else? Because I was really shocked when they brought this up. I mean, it was cool to have Vader visit Exegol because he's going to try to get his revenge. Because the whole thing is, this basically takes place where Luke is... It's after the Empire Strikes Back. Luke and Vader had already fought. Vader now is really upset with a lot of people because, he didn't really know where Luke was or anything like that. And what ended up happening was he decided he was going to get revenge on everybody that knew anything about this whole situation. And in the process, Palpatine actually puts him through all these trials. It's almost kind of like the Jedi trials, but for Sith. And, Vader gets understandably upset because, he sent this, older Sith Lord after him. I mean, it's actually a really good comic series. It's the most recent comic series. I think this is issue number 11, I think. And so, as a result, what's happening is Palpatine's on Exegol. Vader is going to then go to Exegol to extract his revenge. Of course, Palpatine's ready for him. And then, you get this push and pull, and then, of course, Vader's walking by, and you actually see a hand in this jar. Now, again, I'm not necessarily convinced that this is Luke's hand. I mean, you could actually make the argument, but maybe that's not even Luke's hand. I mean, everybody's assuming that it is. You know what I mean? But
Well, yeah, I mean, but I think that's why it drew Vader's attention.
yeah,
Like,
definitely.
it's like if it didn't belong to his, almost like if it didn't call out to him, like why would he care? It's like, all right, he's a freak, he's got a hand that's floating around, but like, no, that's like, that's my son's hand, man. Like, and I know he knows what he's into, and of course, being his, I can't say Padawan, but being his apprentice, he knows that Palpatine is into all types of alchemy and all types of dark side magic and all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
So of course he's kind of wondering, like, okay, well, first of all, one, you hit the fact that my son was even alive, or that's my son, you know didn't die, and then on top of that, now you sent me to kind of basically kill my son. And then now my son didn't die, at my hand, no pun intended. Now you have his hand, and now you're like, okay, well, I'm going to make a clone of him, or that's what it appears to be. So now Vader's already have seen, like, okay, well, now you're trying to snuff me out, and then you're going to make my son, or a version of my son, kind of will be your new apprentice. So, and Vader knows what that would mean. So it's just kind of like Vader's got to be feeling all types of different emotions, at this point, because although he's still in the Empire, you really didn't see it. He still kind of had that moment where he probably looked Luke face to face right before he lopped off his hand. He was just like, or right after he lopped it off, and he was like, we can rule the galaxy together as father and son. Like, I don't think that was just a pull for him to bring him to the dark side, but I think he really wanted to have that bond with Luke.
Oh yeah, no question
And
about it. I
when
mean,
Luke
he
fell,
wanted to
yeah,
overthrow the Emperor.
yeah, and when Luke fell, he just kind of, like, you could tell in his body language, once again, perfectly played by David Prowse. He kind of looked like kind of disheartened by it, like, dang,
Hmm.
like, I had like this short amount of time with my kid, and he'd rather kill himself than be with me. It's just, once again, this, and I could understand why Vader at that point was really ticked off. But of course he felt Luke later on at the end of Empire, like, okay, he survived
Yeah. Well,
because they're
and
having this
again,
whole force conversation. So
right.
you know,
But the whole thing is, and I think it's important to point this out, is that fandom is basically going off the charts right now, speculating that this is Luke's hand. It may or may
mhm.
not even be Luke's hand, but we got Ronaldo with us, of course. And this is a good time to mention, too, we actually had a few new subscribers come aboard this week, which is really great. If you guys are watching, welcome to our Friday show. Hopefully you guys will follow Ronaldo's lead and chat in. So Ronaldo asks a good question. He says, if you had to guess, do you think they'll use this to make Luke canon?
Right,
That's Luke's clone name,
clone, right.
or to explain Snoke? And that's actually a very good question, because we really don't know where this is going. Like I said, I'm actually really surprised that they even did this. I'm surprised they
Yeah.
even made this move, because they had to have known what this was going to do, right?
Well, yeah, and Ronaldo brings up a very valid point, and I think this is really more towards the end. It's really going to more so explain Snoke, because remember, like, when we first, saw Force Awakens, we were like, okay, well, who the heck is this guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then by the time we get to the Last Jedi, you see how ridiculously powerful Snoke is.
Yeah.
That explains it. You know what I mean? Like, if you had a dark side Luke, oh yeah, I can see dark side Luke, or Luke, whatever, which is cheesy, but
It is so cheesy. And again,
I'm
and
gonna
this
add
is
an
one of
extra
the
U to your name.
I have to
You
I
know,
have to say this. Well, and I think it was based on Joris Cabath or whatever his name was. He had like
yeah,
some extra vowels or whatever. But I mean, the thing is that a lot of times, we look back at the expanded universe with this whole romantic type of a thing, and we forget that there were some actually really stupid, goofy things in the expanded universe.
definitely.
I mean, it was
Oh yeah,
not this
yeah,
infallible storytelling thing. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of fantastic, amazing stories in that, but it's not exactly the way that everybody remembers. And this is one of the examples.
Yeah, definitely. But I think this would better serve as an explanation for Snoke.
Oh, totally.
And
You know
because,
what?
of
I
course,
never even thought of that.
yeah, because we never and I was going to bring it up a little bit later after we kind of discussed the Luke part, but to me it seemed like that would be the smart move if Disney or Lucasfilm decided this is what they wanted to do. Because remember, of course, we were all wondering, like, okay, well, where the heck Snoke come from? How did he ascend? How did he do all this stuff? So if they give us more background on Snoke, then I can understand why, and especially, why they chose to go this way and why he was so powerful. But if you remember, like, when Kylo was going through Exegol and, he's seeing all these, like, kind of mutilated Snokes or whatever just kind of floating around. So, and Snoke does look like a bad, no pun intended, a bad batch. So, I just can see that. I mean, that will all make sense to me.
Well, there's a lot of good points that you
that
bring up. One of the points is that Snoke's deformity could be because he was kind of like an experiment gone wrong in a way. He wasn't a perfect clone. Who knows?
Right.
Snoke could even have been sort of a almost like an imperfect Luke, right? Like he tried to clone Luke, but it didn't quite work out. Because if you think about it, this is one of the things, and again, I know this is speculating, I know this is reaching, but if you think about it, Snoke was obsessed with Luke. Now, up until now, we've always said, well, it's because, the fact that Luke was basically the only other powerful Jedi, right, that, could stand up against him. So,
Well, there's also the whole thought of, I can see where you would have like the problem with Vader, much like the problem with Luke, was their stubbornness, right? Anakin was very stubborn and just like Luke was. And so I think that's part of what allowed them not to fully commit to the dark side. Especially Anakin. You know what I'm saying? He always had that conflict. And so I think because and Palpatine could sense that. And so I think that was just why he kept testing him. He kept trying to push him to that point. And then of course, Kylo, once again, kind of being of the same bloodline, he's like, okay, well, maybe we can get this right with Kylo. He's not, torn up and, cut in half and none of that crap. So maybe he'll be the one. But I think that with Luke and Anakin being so stubborn, I think Palpatine probably put a little bit of himself in there, a little bit of his DNA, just that raw evil. Because Snoke really kind of had that Palpatine kind of gravitas in a way. Just the way even his look a little bit, kind of had more of the Palpatine esque vibe. Him shooting the lightning through the floor. I mean, that's more Palpatine, and I could see maybe
there's big time.
Maybe
Palpatine
he mixed
influences.
the two. He I needed like Luke's genetics, but he needs my influence though in order to truly be powerful.
Well, a lot of it has to do with how long. So if this is going to be a canonized issue, which it is, then what this is basically implying is that yes, if he actually was in possession of Luke's hand the whole time, then that means that absolutely he has enough source material, I guess you could say, to do a bunch of different things. And maybe that's it. Maybe it's not to fully clone Luke, but maybe it's to give some of Luke's attributes to whatever clones. And that could be, perhaps that's what Snoke was. Because
right, sure,
I always thought that Snoke, I thought he was an underused villain. I think that one of the things that they did was they killed him off too quick.
Right.
You know, he was really menacing in The Force Awakens. You know,
Oh,
well, first of all,
definitely.
we didn't even know, was that just a hologram that he was, you know, we thought this guy could be like 10 feet tall or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, in The Last Jedi, we see, okay, he's kind of like the
He really is.
intergalactic Hugh Hefner or something with that silver robe. And, you know, and I mean, he's a little taller than the average human, but I mean, he's not, you know, like some giant.
He
But
kind of reminds me of the Caminos, the
yeah,
Caminoans.
a little bit. Yeah, absolutely. Shorter neck, maybe, but
Yeah.
he does. He actually has that Caminoan look. And again, one of the problems is we still don't know who he really. I mean, it's alluded to thanks to the Rise of Skywalker that, yeah, he was obviously
Mm-hmm.
a clone,
Mm-hmm.
but he was a really powerful stand-in if that's all he was, you know? The other thing, too, is was he a clone or was he the source material for those clones that Palpatine was making? Now, granted, he did say that he created them,
Mm-hmm.
so, you know, there is that.
Yeah, definitely. I just, and going back to the comic, I don't think they would just deliberately put this hand right here if it wasn't relevant. You know what I mean? Like that would just be a waste of space. You see what I'm saying? Like, and the fact that Vader's looking at it and then he said, I can use it to make anything. We saw how, and we see this reoccurring theme even in the Mandalorian, right? So the last couple of episodes, even the last Luke episode, we're starting to see like, okay, they're in that little stronghold where Grief Karga, Cara Dune, Mando, they kind of break into that stronghold on Navarro, and they're kind of like, oh, they found that recording of that doctor, and he's like, oh, the M count of this particular thing. Then of
Yep.
course we see, we move further along, and then now we see in the last episode where Luke pops up, we see oh, I can't think of his name. Uh Giancarlo Esposito's character is
Oh, Moff
blanked
Gideon.
out. Moff Gideon, thank you. Moff Gideon, he's talking about how, like, okay, he has a child, they're going to do all these tests and experiments on him, so we knew that from the beginning, that ever since the onset of Baby Yoda or Grogu, we kind of saw him. It's like, okay, they want this child for something. And once again, it was always to do that experimentation. They needed his blood and they already had it, and so now it's kind of like, all right, I'm wondering what they're going to do now, because they did have it. Now, whether Moff Gideon still has it on his person, or if it's sent to a lab somewhere, I don't know. Now they've mentioned Thrawn. Is Thrawn going to continue that? Is Thrawn going to use that? There's so many different variables. But see, I think they're making cloning kind of a part of Star Wars now, definitely, because of, once again, we have all this frame of reference from the Clone Wars. Hello. And then, so that's the base of it all. And then now we've always heard about these clones, Palpatine kind of creating this stuff. Palpatine was always trying to find a way to, bring himself back or sustain himself, or, create these different things. So now that this stuff is part of canon now, I'm really starting to think that as we progress on the sequel side of things, we're going to see a lot more of this cloning technology and kind of some dastardly things that the First Order, or is really trying to create here.
Yeah, well, and this is a good thing because let's get to a couple of the chats, and then after we do that, I mean, one of the things that I really want to explore in this one is where are they going to go with this? It's not even so much about what this really is with Luke's hand and, if that's really what it is or whatever, but it's really more like, why are they introducing that? And where are they going to go with it? Where are they going to take it? How is this going to affect the Mandalorian going forward? How is this maybe Ahsoka? I mean, I think that them putting this in the comic is not some sort of a, hey, wouldn't it be cool if? Even though
Right.
technically it's taking place in the past. So they can always say, well, by the time of the Mandalorian or whatever, I mean, maybe Grogu at that point was the replacement, right? Like maybe something happened with Luke's hand, or, either they're no longer in possession of it, or, whatever the case may be. why are they getting this guy? So let's get to some of these chats here. Ronaldo basically says, if it is used to explain Snoke, would you consider it valid? Because without saying any spoilers, we saw in Bad Batch that Lucasfilm will continue to break canon. And
I know what he's talking about there.
Yeah, I mean, I've read enough. Well, obviously, I saw the first episode. I read enough about today's episode that I get it. And it is true that Lucasfilm does seem to now, they're doing exactly what I said they were going to do. So over the last couple of weeks, I have been talking about the fact that they're going to softly reboot the sequel trilogy. That's my prediction. I don't think that they're going to go and say, yeah, we're going to remake the sequels. I don't think that's going to happen. That's not going to be some big announcement. I think what's going to happen is, over the course of 5-10 years, they're going to keep doing these stories that are going to slowly but surely move the storyline in enough of a different position that the sequel trilogy will then be kind of out of phase with what they're doing, so they're going to have to correct it a little bit, and they're going to morph it a bit. And I think you're starting to see that, because I don't necessarily think that Lucasfilm is breaking canon as much as they're redefining it. Because you have to remember, at the time that the Clone Wars was out, at the time that some of this other stuff, well, I mean, the Clone Wars itself was done by Lucas, right? Filoni was his assistant, and Lucas was the one that was overseeing that. This is before the sale to Disney. Now, Disney gets a hold of it. They make a sequel trilogy, made a lot of money. There's a lot of people that like it, but there's a lot of people that don't. And then they come out with The Mandalorian, the first live-action TV series. And now everybody's jumping on board and saying, hey, we love Star Wars again. Okay, great. So now they started doing it with that show, where they were playing around with canon a little bit and doing some expansion, and people are really enjoying it. That's the reason why we're going to see Fennec Shand in Bad Batch. Because why not, right? People are loving these characters. Let's give them a little bit of backstory. And so I think that that's what can happen. Ronaldo also says, if they will explain Snoke, just say he's a clone that came out of one of the pickle jars from Episode 9. And honestly, I kind of... See, to me, I thought that's what they were doing. I thought that was the explanation. I mean, I find it interesting that people are still kind of on this who is Snoke kick, even though I just kind of said that like 10 minutes ago. But I only said that because it seemed like the explanation that we were given, which in my mind was pretty straightforward in Rise of Skywalker, right? I mean, basically, you get that scene, they're walking through, and, Palpatine basically, you walk by the little aquarium or whatever of Snoke's floating around, and then, Palpatine basically says, I created Snoke. Okay. I mean, to me, that's the explanation. But you still have all this other stuff,
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that's cool. Like, don't get me wrong. I think that's cool that Palpatine created Snoke. That's fine, and I'm okay with that. I mean, the fact that Palpatine is still alive to create Snoke is a bit, but whatever.
Yeah, well, I'm not trying to throw this into a new direction or anything like that, but you can get around that by saying that pretty much maybe that was created before the destruction of the second Death Star. Because
I get it.
This comic is supporting that, because basically, remember, this comic is taking place in between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. And they're on Exegol, and that was one of the criticisms.
Another cloning facility.
Yeah, exactly. That kind of took over Camino and all that. And in fact, this comic book also shows that he's building the First Order, or the Final Order. He's actually showing this to Vader. So the idea, I think, was, again, and this was covered in the Aftermath trilogy, which is another set of new canon novels that I do recommend. But what's happening is basically Palpatine figured that if he wasn't around to run the Empire, then the Empire didn't deserve to be around. And so he orchestrated this whole thing that he was going to bring them all to Jakku, and he was going to essentially detonate this weapon that was going to destroy the entire Empire. That was sort of like a contingency plan. But then we start to learn that he basically had this whole thing engineered where he was going to create this final order and all this other stuff. And I think that what you're seeing is, now that they put that out there in The Rise of Skywalker, you're seeing the new canon material now trying to write all this backstory in order to support it.
Yeah, but I think here's a couple of my issues though. Like, one, okay, so with, I get the purpose. I mean, I get creating Snoke, but like, okay, where did the First Order even come from? Like, how did they even ascend to? Because remember, like, the Mandalorian, we see the New Republic. Like, that's kind of like the new government. So then, like, all right, well, you got to explain to us then now how the new government is all of a sudden, the New Republic got wiped out, and now you have the First Order now.
Well, the New
And
Republic didn't get wiped
that,
out. You have to remember that. The New Republic did not get wiped out. See, this is where they are somewhat following, the old expanded universe a little bit. Because in the old expanded universe, you basically had, once the second Death Star was destroyed, you basically had the remnants of the Empire. And you had all these people kind of fighting for, power.
Control.
And Grand Admiral Thrawn was the one who had enough, and he was cunning enough. He was able to actually pretty much put it back together and create a somewhat formidable version of the Empire. Now, you still had factions, and that was part of the storylines too that they dealt with. But for the most part, he was actually doing that. Now, you at the same time, you had the New Republic government. And then eventually, what I thought was really cool was, I don't remember if Thrawn was around. No, because Paleon was now the head of the Empire. So Paleon, who was basically Thrawn's right-hand man, once Thrawn was destroyed, Paleon comes around, and they actually have a truce. They sign this whole little treaty thing, and they actually have a truce. And the Empire basically was able to carve out this little spot in the galaxy for them. And the New Republic was basically like, look, as long as you stay there, as long as you guys are cool, we're not going to mess with you. Do whatever you want. Be your own people or whatever. And that's what happened. Now, the way that they twisted that around in what we have now in New Canon with the sequel trilogy is they basically created the New Republic, but then they created the First Order. And then, of course, the First Order decided to destroy the capital of the New Republic, and then what I thought was really interesting was they wrote it in such a way that there was actually a faction of the New Republic that kind of became the New Rebellion, and that's the Resistance. But you're right, they do have to explain that, and I think they're going to. I think
that that's what I'm saying. That whole part though is that's a big chunk in the piece that's really truly missing. And then on top of that, you got the whole thing with right now being a Palpatine. It's well, okay, how do you explain that then? Because that was never really just explained fully, how that really happened. This is kind of it. It's oh, you're a Palpatine. It's oh, okay, she's a Palpatine. Well, how the heck is she a Palpatine when there's, you've got a lot of loose ends here. And
what?
That's what
it's fan service gone wrong, man. It really is. Okay, let's get to some of these chats.
Yeah.
I feel myself going off on a tangent, and I don't want to do it, at least not yet. So Ronaldo basically says, another question. Good, we like questions. If it turns out that Luke's hand was used to create Snoke, and they confirm that Snoke was in Mandalorian, do you think that Lucasfilm should continue to explain the sequels? As we're thinking.
Well, okay. So, and they confirmed that Snoke was in the Mandalorian. We don't know that yet because there's still that time period because
Well, then that's what I was about to say to answer your question, is that you're like, well, they got to explain the first, they got to do that. I'm like, well, keep in mind that even during The Mandalorian, you're still talking a good 24 years before Force Awakens.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, because Mandalorian takes place 6 years after Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, so it's still early.
So it's still early. So I don't think Snoke is even thought of literally.
Well, but again,
so,
and this kind of goes into what I was saying, though. I mean, what I was saying before, and that is you have to figure out when he was created, because a lot of people assume that, oh, they're being cheesy with this. Snoke is created because, now they retrofitted it to be Palpatine, really wasn't dead, and he's doing all that. And don't get me wrong, that could be what they were saying. But what I'm saying is,
go ahead.
Well, he could have actually been created before the fall of the second Death Star.
I
know it's reaching, but hey, they went to Exegol, right? I mean, he's creating the Final Order already. He hasn't even created the First Order yet.
Talk about shooting for the edit.
Yeah, right.
No, I mean,
I'm just saying.
I mean, but here's the thing, and this is what I'm saying, like timeline wise, because, all right, if we're saying like, okay, Mandalorian takes place 6 years after Return of the Jedi. When we first kind of, I guess, now since they've gone back, the first glimpse of we were hearing about Snoke is roughly around the time when Kylo is actually like probably in his late teens, maybe early 20s. So you got at least,
I don't know how.
You got at least, you got at least 17 years, because, I mean, once again, because I find it hard to believe that Snoke could just rise up in the middle of all this while Luke Skywalker is at his zenith.
Well, but again,
I really don't think that would actually happen.
But the thing, here's what you got to look at, though. In the Rise of Kylo Ren comic series, Snoke, I don't really know what he was at that point, because he didn't really feel like he was the head of the First Order or something. I mean, he was like, he kind of almost looked like he was like a scientist or something, right? He was kind of like in a greenhouse or something or whatever when he was talking to Kylo. And of course, Han and Leia knew who he was. So, I mean, he might have been one of those guys that was rising to prominence, like he was a political figure and maybe jumped ship.
Kind of like young Palpatine.
Pretty much. I mean, it could be a similar case. So, like, he's well known around the galaxy, but then he only recently had become, pretty much exactly like Palpatine, where he's working in the shadows. He's pretending to be one thing, but he's really something else. Let's get this one. Joanne Vansel says, will the Clone Wars be a motion picture? Kind of was. The first episode.
The first episode, yeah.
Was like a feature-length thing. In fact, it even had Christopher Lee playing Dooku and Samuel L. Jackson playing Mace Windu in that one. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, they were later replaced by the voice actors, but you have to remember, the Clone Wars, when did that premiere, like 2006?
Yeah, I want to say
I think that was it, because I remember Revenge of the Sith came out in 2005, and it was the next year, because that was the one where Lucas said, oh, I'm not going to do anything else Star Wars related. And then, of course, he announced the Clone Wars series. And then they said that they were going to put the first episode or two in theaters. And we were all happy that we were going to, we were reaching,
more
but it's
Star
like
Wars
at least.
Content, yeah.
Exactly. We're going to a theater to see something Star Wars related. So then the Clone Wars went for 6 seasons. And then, of course, it took a little bit of a break because of the sale to Disney. And then it came back for a 7th season. So I guess the question would be somewhat relevant in, do you think that they'll actually
technically Attack of the Clones was a motion picture as well.
Yeah, I guess.
That's the beginning of it.
But the thing is, though, and this is a good question for you, too, do you actually think that they might do a full-length animated Clone Wars movie? I don't think they're going to do it in theaters, but they could do it in Disney Plus if they wanted.
But I mean, for what though? Like,
I know. There's almost
I'm just saying. No, I'm just saying, like, what era? Like, are we talking about like sequel, like era?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I
Because I mean, the
guess
Clone Wars
they
is already
could,
wrapped up, so
yeah,
it's
and not
like,
only that, because you know where it comes in. I'll tell you why this is a tough question to answer, because the Clone Wars actually at the end overlaps Episode 3. So it's
right,
got that definitive end. It's like you can't go
yeah.
anywhere after. I mean, the Bad Batch is doing that,
Mm-hmm.
and they could pull a
The Bad
Bad
Batch is
Batch.
just kind of well, the Bad Batch is kind of like yeah, direct transition. It's capturing the transition period
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a
between
sequel. Well, basically, what it's doing is it's following the exploits of a particular group that we were introduced to in the Clone Wars.
right,
Now,
and
who's
it's
to
kind
say
of
they
showing you.
couldn't? Yeah, now they could, they could do something with another group, right?
Hmm. You can
You
show
know?
like yeah, what another group is doing on the other side of the galaxy or whatever,
Sure. Like
during that same time
simultaneously.
period. Sure,
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
right.
I don't know if they really want to get in the business of that. Like, here's what. I mean, let's do a movie on the origin of Broom Kid from The Last Jedi. I don't know if we really need to see all that, but
Right.
so
So,
Ronaldo, before I get to that, Ronaldo says, "Don't you
mhm.
think that to some extent it could damage the brand?" And I think that he's talking about if they start trying to explain Snoke too much, or in some of these
Well,
ways that we were talking about.
I don't think it damages the brain if you're talking about because we're already there. We're already covering like what's happening post Return of the Jedi. We're just going way in the beginning, and there's a lot of time, like you said, it's 24 years, so that's a lot of space that you can cover without touching the sequel trilogy, and hopefully making the sequel trilogy make a little bit more sense.
Well, here's
So
a little
honestly, I
bit.
would probably welcome that.
Yeah. Well, and here's a little bit more clarification. He says, what I mean is, what we saw in season 2 when Din Djarin, Kara, and Grief went into the lab, and we saw that Snoke type creature. I mean, I think all they're doing, honestly, is just trying to retrofit an origin story for Snoke. But
Well,
they're
I mean,
doing
yeah,
it with
that
various pieces.
yeah, and it shows that like, okay, you're this is what the emperor was working on, or this was in play. And actually, I've forgotten about that. The Snoke thing
Yeah,
was in there,
so did I. I completely
So
forgot about it, actually. First, I was like, "You
yeah,
sure that's?" And then I'm like, "Oh yeah."
right,
Before I look like an idiot on our Star Wars show again, let me.
yeah. But I mean, yeah. So with that Snoke character or that you know little prop or whatever being in a little tube, like okay, I get that. Like okay, you could say maybe they were already working on that, and so it didn't come into fruition until maybe some years later. And then now he had to kind of rise to the ranks, kind of get some political capital, and then he was able to kind of seek out Kylo Ren. And once so I could, like you said, it's 24 years, and that's what approximately it looks like Kylo Ren is, roughly about 24 years old in those movies. So
He was born because they kind of dealt with that with The Last Shot. That was actually one of the things that I thought was really cool about that book, because again, The Last Shot was pretty much an offshoot of the Solo movie, and what it did
mhm,
was it dealt with Han and Lando after Return of the Jedi and a lot of the challenges they faced trying to return to somewhat of what was normal for them, or what would have been normal for them before the whole war thing, right? So Han was a
mhm,
smuggler, and Lando was kind of a gambler slash smuggler kind of guy, right? And now they became these war heroes, and they're basically that's not really what they know, and they're trying to go back
mhm,
to what they know in a way, but they're trying to balance that with their new life as these heroes of the rebellion, and now they're basically in charge of running some things or whatever. And then of course it deals with Han having Ben Solo, who we know turns into
mhm,
Kylo Ren, and the challenges of, okay, now you're a father. And then of course it also flashes back to just after the events of Solo for both Lando and Han. So it's kind of interesting how it's juxtaposing their younger life with the older life. But again, I bring that up to say that I think he was born
Not the
maybe a
Ripper.
few years after return. I'd actually have to look that up. Ronaldo might chat that in, but we have to figure out like when was Kylo actually born because I don't remember.
Yeah.
I know it's been covered, but it's also been talked about a lot too. So
Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, I just think that all in all, I think the timeline, you kind of have to make sure the timeline fits certain spots and pieces. I think we definitely need an answer for like Snoke, and then we still need an answer for Rey, honestly, because okay, yeah, Palpatine had her parents or whatever the case may be, but that still doesn't explain like how she was as powerful as she was, and her being part of the Palpatine bloodline is just kind of like, okay, well, how the heck did that happen? You see what I'm saying? Like, there's
right.
still a lot of questions in that. So I think those things need to be addressed more so than. But I think this whole evil clone Luke thing, I don't think they're really going to do that because one, I think the fans would hate that because this is not the Luke Skywalker that everybody wants to see. Everybody wants to see what we got at the last episode of Mandalorian. That's the Luke Skywalker everybody wanted.
Well,
And
but here's
so,
here's the thing though. Do you think that, and this is going to make a really big difference, do you think that they're going to pursue this? Let's just say that they are planning on bringing back the whole evil Luke clone thing.
mhm.
Do you think that they're going to do that strictly in the comics, which is where they introduced it? Or do you think they're actually going to bring that into the broader canon, like television or movies
if
or
they do
something?
it, if they do it, it's got to stay in the comics.
Well, and I don't really necessarily think it hurts anything if it stays in the comics.
That's what I'm saying. Like, if it stays in the comics, and then you can kind of quietly deal with it, but like, real fans will want to see like once again, like, okay, we don't want that Luke Skywalker. We want the hero Luke, and we want, and of course, like I said, the fans at large. Once again, granted, I know we're not trying to necessarily make Star Wars movies for the casual fan. You want to make it for the hardcore fans, but at this, you still kind of have to honor and kind of respect those casuals, and that's going to take it way beyond, what I'm saying, what they get, and like I said, we've already jumped around enough. We've already confused people enough. Even some of the hardcore fans, you're kind of like, what? So I think that if you want to deal with the evil clone Luke, keep it in the comics. But I think this will be a better explanation, honestly, for Snoke, and then you can start unraveling that whole mystery of Snoke, of Palpatine, of Rey, and I think that will kind of at least make the sequel trilogy, which is honestly the thing that has burned fans the most. I think that would bring some sort of peace, you know, to to the fandom, and then now you can start moving in a direction where you're getting away from the whole Skywalker saga, and now you can start branching off into other things, and we can hopefully have better and greater content.
Well, and I agree. But what I'm hoping, though, is that if they're going to do this, and again, it's been my hope for a long time, that they learn from the High Republic and they're all collaborating and coming up with a plan. That they're not
Mm-hmm.
just jamming this stuff in and, basically just seeing what the fans like or just, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we did this, but then it doesn't relate to anything else. That's what I'm really hoping.
Right.
Ronaldo says Kylo Ren was born 5 years after the Battle of Yavin in Chandrila. So 5 years after the Battle of Yavin would actually only be 2 or 3 years after Return of the Jedi. So essentially, the years could be played around with a little bit, but essentially you're talking somewhere between Return of the Jedi and The Mandalorian.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's basically one of those things that I think that if that's the case, then yeah, he's late 20s, around
Yeah, like
Force
I said,
Awakens,
man,
early
I said
30s.
probably mid to late 20s. Yeah.
Yeah. But, I mean, I'm just wondering, though, and this is getting back to the whole question. What do you think that this basically means going forward? It's not even just about, is that Luke's hand that we see, in this, I don't know, like, it kind of looks like a bacta tank, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So they're preserving it, obviously. And I think you're right. I mean, I think that they're doing it more so to get DNA off of it than to, actually clone Luke. And I honestly don't think that that's where they're going to go. I don't actually think that's the direction they're going to go, but I've been wrong before when it comes to stuff like this. You know what I mean? It's like you think, hey, the smart thing to do would be to not do this, and then that's what they end up doing.
Exactly. No, I mean, honestly, I don't think they're going to bring it, like I said, an evil Luke, because that's not what fans really want to see. And I think it would do too much damage. And you're trying to honestly repair the faith and trust in the fans. And so I think this would be a better use of Snoke, because he's already been established. We've already seen him. We already know that he's super powerful and everything like that. And it also kind of explains why, like, okay, he was not a Sith Lord, or at least we still haven't heard that designation, like, Darth Snoke or anything like that. So I don't think that was the case. I think he was just more so like a really powerful apprentice that was kind of, like you said, a stand-in for Palpatine until he could kind of continue to work in the background and complete his final order. And so then that way, when it was time, he could reveal himself and then go forth. And I think that would be the better use of this. But it's cool to see that, like, Palpatine was thinking this far ahead. So you're thinking about this is in between Empire and Return of the Jedi. It just shows you once again, as we've always said about Palpatine, how calculating he is and how far ahead of the game he was.
Well, that's the part that I actually enjoy about this. When you look at Joanne, she says, I love the comics, so I'm glad more of them are coming. I mean, the comics have actually been around forever. The comics have been... Now, I have to admit that when they first started popping up in the 90s, hey, maybe even the 80s, I remember actually after the original Star Wars, A New Hope came out, they did... they basically retold the story of A New Hope, but they did it in two very large-sized comic books, which, of course, I wish I held on to them. They're collector's items now, but then they did a comic version of Empire Strikes Back, which, I've shown that to people. And then at some point, Marvel did it. They had the Dark Horse comics or whatever, and that's a lot of where this dark side Luke stuff comes from, because there was actually a point where the real Luke turned to the dark side for a minute, basically. And then he came back. So, I don't know. Here's another one here. Ronaldo says, fun fact. Eddie Redmayne was one of the candidates to be Kylo Ren along with Adam Driver. Can you imagine Eddie as Kylo? I could see it, but I think so often what happens when a great performer gets a role, it's really then hard to imagine anybody else in the role. Like when Adam Driver took that on, he became Kylo Ren to the point that even when I see him in other movies, it's like, man, it's Kylo Ren. And it's, you just kind of like, even if he's acting, because he was in Logan Lucky or something like that, and he actually played a semi-comedic role. And you're just like, and even Marriage Story, that movie, amazing movie he did with Scarlett Johansson. He played like this artistic, like theater guy, and he kind of had like this black, shirt on and some black pants, and you're like,
it's
Kylo Ren, and it's like, even though I was really absorbed in the story and all that stuff, I'm like, man, you're going to talk to Kylo Ren like that? You're like, I mean, that was kind of weird, but he embodies that character though.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, that's just like, another fun fact that Michael B. Jordan actually went out for the role of Finn. He completely bombed that audition. Yeah. He completely bombed that audition. It's like, yeah, I couldn't see him playing Finn. It's just
The
That's
problem
John
with
Boyega.
him playing Finn is that he's a little bit too, like, if they wrote Finn a little bit differently, I could see him playing Finn.
Yeah, if Finn was actually the hero that he was kind of supposed to
If
be.
he was more of a hero, or if he was just like a little bit rougher around the edges, I could see it. But the thing is that Finn kind of has this balance of almost like goofiness and hardcoreness, which I actually think that John Boyega captures perfectly. Again, it's really hard. There's some people where you can go, okay, just about anybody. But even, look, we did a whole show on David Prowse. Now, all he was the guy in the Vader suit. But yet, there's something about when he was Vader, when he was embodying that character. They've had other people in the Vader suit, and it's not like David Prowse was.
Right. Definitely. Yeah.
Just like Harrison Ford. Can you really imagine? Because, like, Tom Selleck was supposed to play Han Solo at one point. Well, no, he was supposed to play Indiana Jones. But they had a couple of people that Kurt Russell actually was up for Han Solo, and I can kind of see that.
See, I could kind of see that one.
I could see that one, but
especially
ultimately,
at that time.
yeah. Ultimately, though, I think that
But the humor and the suaveness that, see, I think Kurt Russell has Han Solo's danger, his elements of danger, but that kind of cool swagger that Harrison Ford kind of brings to has.
I mean,
it's
they're
just
really
different.
similar.
I'm not saying that he doesn't have it.
It's different.
But
it's kind of like you said. It's different.
It's different, yeah.
It's different. And then Ronaldo says also Tom Holland was almost cast as Finn.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I could see that.
I could see that, yeah. Especially with paired with Daisy Ridley. And that's another thing, like, too. Like, I couldn't see Michael B. Jordan with Daisy Ridley. Like, it just, their interaction would just be weird to me.
Completely. I can't see that at all. And it's, again, my hat's off to casting directors who actually really, because again, a lot of times you think in terms of this person playing this role in an isolated kind of a thing, but in reality, you got to think of the chemistry with the other actors too. Like, you might find the perfect person to play a particular role, but then they go read with the other actors and there's nothing there.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like one of the things that I thought was funny was, you remember the whole James Bond movie, A View to a Kill, right?
Yep.
And it was Roger Moore's last movie, and it was like he and Tanya Roberts had zero chemistry together. Like, none. He brought that up in his autobiography, I guess, that it just, and you could tell. I mean, you could tell watching the movie that it's like, look, these people probably don't even want to be in the same room, much less in a scene together, much less playing, some sort of romantic couple, yeah.
Right.
And I thought that Daisy Ridley and Adam Driver had really good chemistry too.
Oh yeah, they have great chemistry. I mean, and then her and John Boyega, it just fit. They just seemed like, okay, like they were really, you could tell they both were really excited about Star Wars, and so they were excited that they were with each other. Like, oh, you're Star Wars, so yeah, me too. And that energy came across, but I couldn't see Michael B. Jordan.
Well, this is a good one.
That would just be weird.
What about Sylvester Stallone as Han Solo? That almost happened. I can see him as Han. I could, in a different universe, and I know that Star Wars is a different universe.
Nah, man, I can't see Sly. Not in that one.
I mean,
yeah, Han Solo. Like, yeah, no, man. Yeah, no, man. No. No.
Again, you have to.
Hey,
part of the problem,
me. Like, just no. I'm sorry. I'm thinking of all the classic lines, and I just can't. I know,
and you're basically Stallone-izing them. And actually, as you're doing it, now I can't stop. You realize this is going on in my head, right? That I'm.
Oh, we're gonna joke about this forever now.
Oh yeah, that's gonna be part of our repertoire now. It's kind of like spitting out Han Solo lines, but it's Sylvester Stallone. It'd basically be like, stop or my girlfriend will shoot. I mean, it's just, there's no end to it. And again, part of the problem too is that when you so closely, you know, you basically just get so used to one particular character playing somebody, it's hard to imagine. Like, now here's a good example though. So Leonard Nimoy is Spock, you know, like on, it seems like every show now we got to do a Star Trek reference. But yet when Zachary Quinto played him, I thought, okay, I can accept this. Yeah. And then when the guy who actually did it in Star Trek Discovery, I thought he was even better. So now you got like 3 different people playing an iconic character. Now, of course, Leonard Nimoy is Spock. We all know that. But it is amazing that if you're presented with it, that you can accept it. Now, granted, they're playing younger versions of him, and maybe sometimes at different timelines. But the point is that you have to basically get a particular actor's performance out of your mind in order to imagine somebody else playing them.
Yeah.
You know, and then of course, she agrees. Joanne agrees. No way.
She agrees.
No Sylvester Stallone. But if Sylvester Stallone had been the guy though to play him,
we probably would say like, "Oh man, no one else can play him."
You know, Harrison Ford was once up for him. Oh no, that would never work. You know, that's the kind of.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
you know, that's part of the fun of this whole thing. You know, it's like, you just never know. Now this one is truly funny, and Michael Jackson wanted to be Jar Jar, and that's true. That is a true story. He did, and of course, you know, Ronaldo. Definitely doesn't agree with that one. You don't really think, though, that Michael Jackson would have been a good Jar Jar?
Oh, I think he would have. They're both goofy.
I do, too. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, it's like...
I mean, I could see...
I could see it.
After seeing Michael be, like, in The Wiz, and, you know, it's like, okay, like, he can act, you know, and I think he's one of those... He's such a perfectionist. That's the thing about him. He's such a perfectionist in everything he does that I could see him playing.
Yeah, I think he would do a really good job, actually.
I mean, because their voices are just about the same.
I know, that's what I was about to say. I mean, it's kind of like
a suit, so it's like, you know, you could, I mean, well, the whole mocap suit, but I mean, still, like, I could see him, as long as he doesn't do anything like, you know, a spin like Michael Jackson, or, you know, start moonwalking or something, like, it's like, okay, like, come on now. But I mean,
well, I don't think Lucas would have gone for that anyway. But yeah, I mean, I know what you mean, though. It's kind of like, as long as you're not too Michael Jackson-y, you know, I mean, well, that's the problem, you know, because he's an iconic guy. He's an iconic entertainer, and it's really difficult to break that out. It's no different than any actor that is just kind of like known for being them, you know, because there's a lot of actors that actually wanted to be in it. I mean, when Daniel Craig wanted to be in it, okay, he's a stormtrooper, so cool.
Yep.
You know, but it would be really tough to see certain actors within the Star Wars thing, you know.
Yeah, definitely.
But and then of course, you know, Joanne agrees with that one. I think he'd be good. But more importantly, though, where do you think that, like I said, I want to get into this a little bit before we wrap all this stuff up, because my whole thing is, are they going to now either use this as a launching point to retrofit and sort of walk back on some of the things that we saw in the sequel trilogy, or do you think that maybe this is kind of like a one and done thing, or do you think that maybe it's somewhere in between? Like, they're not necessarily going to feature this particular thing, but maybe it's going to influence the direction of things like the Ahsoka series, the Mandalorian series, the Book of Boba Fett.
I think it's going to be a mix or the in-between. I think it's, once again, I think all this is doing is really just solidifying Palpatine as who he was, as far as who Palpatine was, you know, and because Palpatine is one of those characters that we know a lot about, but we don't. You know what I mean? Because we know, okay, he became this politician, and then he kind of quietly worked in the shadows until eventually he could maneuver himself in order to become emperor, and then the rest is history. We see everything else unfold kind of before our eyes, but there's so much that we don't know about him prior to him becoming Senator Palpatine. And so I think what this is kind of shedding light on is, okay, this is what Palpatine is doing. I mean, we hear about him in the books, where he's hearing voices or he's feeling a presence from the unknown regions, and, he's kind of wants to go explore that stuff. And so, we've seen it even in the Clone Wars animation show, like where he's um dabbling in dark side magic, where you see him, kind of coming through different portals and all types of stuff. So once again, this is not beyond the realm or the reach of Palpatine. I think all this is doing is really just showing, like, okay, how powerful Palpatine was and why he was so powerful, because not only is he strong in the force, but he's strong in these other attributes as well. And that's what makes Palpatine so incredibly formidable, is because not only is he, like I said, strong in the force, but he's a master strategist. He's alchemist. He's, he's just everything. And so a guy like him is really kind of hard to keep down. And so I think this is just really showing you what Vader was really trying to come up against. But I think going forward, I think what we're going to see now is the continuation of Palpatine's plan. It seems like that's where we're going in The Mandalorian, where they already have extracted Grogu's blood. That's already been a fact. So now, because Moff Gideon said, I already have what I needed from him. You could take him. I already have what I need from him. Because that was the whole issue before, is that they weren't able to get enough of the sample. But my thing is, going to your question that you've asked several times, who's really pulling the strings? Is it really Gideon? Is it someone else? Is it Thrawn? We don't know. So I think that's where we're going to end. Like you said, I think the future is Thrawn. So maybe Thrawn has kind of picked up some of that stuff from Palpatine, and he's trying to recreate his own versions of some stuff. So, I mean, you've read most of all the Thrawn books anyway, at least at this point. So you probably able to, see if Thrawn has that background, or if he's kind of dabbled in that stuff.
I mean, the nice thing about the latest Thrawn series, which basically the second book of this new trilogy just came out, and I mean, I'm still trying to get through the High Republic, so I haven't really read that yet, but this latest trilogy, they're actually going back, and it's pretty much before Thrawn even met, the Empire and came into that side, except for that one cameo with Anakin. That was about it. And again, that's informing the whole Thrawn character, right? So, I mean, I think that we're getting a little bit of that. And then also, I think that I agree with you in the sense of, I think that all they're doing with little things like this whole showing Luke's hand and different things like that is, I think that all they're really doing is just trying to fill in some gaps. They're just trying to fill in a little bit, give you a little bit fuller picture of what Palpatine was planning, what was happening, how it all fits. How does it connect from the prequels to the original trilogy to the sequel trilogy? How is it? It's like just basically giving us a fuller picture. Because you're right, in The Mandalorian Season 3 coming up, Dave Filoni basically was saying, okay, look, I can't, and I'm sure we'll do a show on this at some point, but he was like, I can't really say too much, but I'll just say the Force is strong with Season 3 or something like that. So that implies to me that we're going to see a little bit more Force stuff, maybe a little bit more Jedi stuff, and now I got to wonder if maybe Grogu isn't coming back. Up until now, we just assumed that we weren't going to see him now. Right? That he went off to train with Luke or whatever, but I don't know.
To me, I just think, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, Ronaldo weighs in on this too. He says, I think they'll either try to explain Snoke or it will only be a little Easter egg. And again, I mean, this is what I'm thinking is that they're going to try to pepper in, whether it's directly related to Snoke or not, I don't know. But I think that all they're going to do is just they're going to try to continue to give us a little bit more of this information just to fill in gaps in the storyline or to give us a little bit more of a full picture of something that they introduced maybe in a movie or something.
Yeah, I mean, I just have a sneaky suspicion that in Mandalorian season 3, I think either they're trying to create something like a Snoke or something like that, or I think that somebody wants Force abilities, and this is their way of trying to figure out, okay, because everybody has midichlorians in their body. It's just that some people have a higher count.
Oh, yeah, almost
So
like kind of how steroids would kind of increase your muscle mass kind of thing. You're thinking maybe something to juice up your midichlorian count to give you strong Force abilities.
Yeah. So now, okay, now I got powers now, or I can tap into the stuff now.
I just hope they don't make it as stupid as, Cheetah and Wonder Woman. I mean, look, I'm just saying, there's always that chance.
Yeah, like you just, right. I got you.
I mean, there is and that's it. I mean, I just hope that,
same property, so.
Well, that's true, but I do trust Filoni. I trust Filoni and Favreau. Those are the only guys that I really trust. Like the Patty Jenkins thing, she's doing that Rogue Squadron movie still?
Yeah.
I say still because, yeah, right, because, you never know between now and then. Then there's been more rumors again that Kathleen Kennedy's going to step down and hand the keys to the kingdom to like Favreau or something. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff going around. But, I don't know. So, I mean, I guess we're just going to have to wait and see how this unfolds. Like I said, the latest Star Wars comic just came out. And by Star Wars comic, because people are like, well, what are we talking about here? They actually have a Star Wars series, right, that's more generalized, that follows different storylines. And then they have the specific ones, like the Darth Vader series. So we'll have to see how that goes. But, more importantly, what are you guys thinking about all this? I mean, do you think that this is really Luke's hand and they're going to maybe bring this whole concept from Legends back in? Or do you think, hey, maybe not? And while you're thinking about it, don't forget to hit that like button and hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you guys know when we're coming out with stuff, because we might even have to do some pre-recorded stuff. There's a lot of stuff happening in Star Wars right now. And it might be hard to cover it just, twice a week. But the question is, do we have Clear Your Mind this week?
We do technically, but it's for Monday. Most of the questions are geared towards Monday's episode.
Like so how geared really towards Monday? Like you can't ask them? Geared. Like really geared?
Yeah.
All right, so we'll just have to hold them off till next week. That's fine.
In case people, still haven't had a chance.
Yeah.
Because today's episode, so I don't want to.
I know.
Like even Ronaldo earlier.
Right. Well, and we try to be respectful of this. Like I said, on Monday's show, we're going to do a review of episodes 1 and 2 of The Bad Batch because we're trying to give people, the weekend. I mean, the first episode premiered this past Tuesday. The second episode premiered today. How long was it? Today's episode?
Today's episode was like 28 minutes.
Okay, so it's a little bit more than probably what most of them are going to be then.
Well, I think so. I mean,
because the first
I think
one
they're probably
going
to hover
like an hour,
70 minutes.
Yeah,
like 70 minutes. But I think this one is probably going to be roughly, I think, the average of each episode. The
series is so good so far.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great.
It's gonna, yeah.
I mean, I just can't believe how good, because again, I mean, and I'm trying to save this to Monday, but I'm just really kind of surprised by, because this was a series I wasn't really looking forward to. I'm probably going to say this exact same thing on Monday, but yeah, be sure to check us out Monday night at 8 o'clock, and we're going to be bringing you, of course, the review of The Bad Batch. Then next Friday at 8, who knows? Maybe we'll do, I don't know. There's so much going on in Star Wars. It's really tough to see. I guess you'll have to check us out on Monday to see what we're going to talk about Friday, right?
Yep.
So, all right. Well, with that, again, don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you guys like what you're seeing. We do this twice a week, Monday and Friday at 8 o'clock Eastern time. We chat with you guys live. Of course, we're going to be putting out even more content eventually because, like I said, there's just so much going on. Can't do it in 2 live shows. So make sure you hit that like button and hit the notification bell so you know when we do come out with that new content. And if you check the link in the description, if you guys are so inclined, we got a couple of packages. If you guys become donating monthly or whatever, you can buy us a blue milk. We're part of the Buy Me a Coffee program now. So, if you guys want to throw a couple dollars our way, be sure to donate. If not, hey, we love you anyway, and we're glad that you guys are watching, and welcome to the new subscribers. So with that, I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.